Welcome back to Accessible Gourmet. Today we're making Khachapuri, or Georgian cheese bread. This is one of my niece's favorite dishes, so I figured I'd try to give it a go. To start the dish, I'm weighing out 192 grams of all-purpose flour. If you don't have a kitchen scale, I really would recommend that you buy one, but if you don't want to have the expense, then you can just measure this out. It's 1 3/4 cup. So if you're using measuring cups, be sure to fluff your flour before you put it in the measuring cup and then level it off just to make sure you have the correct amount, because we are baking here and it is a science. I'm just pouring this directly into my stand mixer bowl, to which we're also going to add 1½ teaspoons of sugar, 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of dry active yeast, which I'm adding to the sugar side because the salt can denature the yeast, so we don't want that to happen. Then we have 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons of cold water that I'm adding 1 tablespoon of olive oil to. And we're just going to make sure your dough hook is correctly attached to your stand mixer before mixing this for about 30 seconds just to get the dry ingredients incorporated together. Then we're going to slowly start to drizzle in our water and oil mixture. And we're going to mix this on medium just until we form a sticky dough. Once our dough is formed, we're going to lightly flour a silpat mat or workbench, and we're going to tip out our sticky dough onto this. We're going to give this a nice little knead for about 5 minutes, or until you get a nice, soft, bouncy dough. This is a great way of taking out any stress or frustration. Just give this a nice knead, and when you press on your dough, it should bounce back. Now we're going to shape this into a ball, just tucking those ends to the bottom of our dough ball. And we're going to lightly oil a bowl with some olive oil. And then roll our dough so it's coated evenly in the oil. And we're going to cover this and let this rest at room temperature for 2½ hours, or until our dough has doubled in size. Now that our dough has doubled, we're going to lightly flour a piece of parchment paper, and once again tip out our dough. We're going to start rolling this until we get a 12-inch round, and you can use more flour as you need it. Just try not to use too much. I find it easier to spin the parchment rather than try to lift the dough because it is super stretchy, and rotate it around so we get an even 12-inch disc of this beautiful, soft, supple bread dough. Now we're going to start rolling up the edges just to form a rim so that when we add our cheese and bake this in the oven, which should be preheating at 375, the cheese doesn't fall out. So we want almost an eyeball or elliptical boat shape. So just keep rolling your edges, and when you get to the ends, just give those a little twist. You don't have to be as precious as I'm being here. I'm just a little OCD. But once we have our little dough boat formed, we're going to slide the parchment right onto a baking sheet. Now I have 1½ cups of feta and 1½ cups of shredded mozzarella cheese. We're going to start filling the middle of our dough boat with our cheeses. You could definitely mix the cheeses ahead of time in a bowl so you don't have to go from one bowl to the next. It's completely up to you. But we're just going to continue filling and mounting a little higher in the middle of our cheese stack, because that's going to melt down and get into the crevices of our dough boat. So we are going to bake this in the oven at 375 for 20 minutes, or until our dough is nicely golden and our cheese is molten and melty. Full disclosure here, I forgot to put an egg wash on my dough before I baked it, but it still turned out okay. But definitely put an egg wash on your dough. And after 20 minutes, this is what your cheese bread should look like. So we are just going to take the parchment and lift it and bring it right onto our bench. This looks absolutely stunning. So this is traditionally served with an egg yolk. Some people use a whole egg, but if you do use a whole egg, you're going to want to bake it for a couple more minutes so the whites cook. And it's also served with a pat of butter. I actually had some truffle butter, so I figured I would slap a little truffle butter onto this to make it a little fancy. Then we're going to garnish with some parsley. And I like to add a little chili flake just because it adds a little kick of flavor into our already flavorful khachapuri. Now we're going to take a fork and start mixing that yolk and our butter into our molten cheese. And the hot cheese is going to cook our yolk, so you don't have to be worried about eating a raw egg. And that butter is just going to infuse throughout the rest of our cheese and egg mix and just add so much flavor. Now let's give this a little taste. The feta adds a tanginess and a tartness, while the mozzarella cheese is super rich and creamy. And that egg yolk just adds a rich decadence to this dish. And look at this cheese pull. That, my friend, is what cheese pulls are made of. This is a great treat to make for a weekend, for yourself or your family. I could literally eat this whole thing, but I will not. I will share it with my partner. But there it is, my version of khachapuri, or a Georgian cheese bread. I really hope you try to make this because I think it'll be something that you'll make over and over again. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and click the notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Until next time, happy cooking.